Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? If you're in my other class, hopefully you've done the work you've caught up or what have you. So, again, today this is going to be for Thursday, the 21st of May. Okay, we're in the spring quarter 2020. Your school, if you've forgotten, is International University of the East. Okay. Again, we're in spring quarter. This is the 5th week. So you're going to have this lecture material, and I'm sending a test to the office, and then the office will send you the midterm. So don't get panicky. I think on my last recording, I said midterm, and then I was tired at the end, and I said final. So sometimes students are asleep for the whole 3 parts, and then the end of the year, final. You know we're at the half part of the quarter, so unless you have not been awake or following. So you had a midterm coming up, so you'll have this lecture. This material will not be on your midterm, okay? So don't worry about that. This will be on your final. So that being said, after you complete your midterm, which was the first 4 weeks, if you want to forget that material, that's fine. I would hope that you would want to remember something, you know, just in case for your own knowledge. Just like I'm not from Korea, but I do know who King Kojong was. I know who King Sejong was. I know what King Kojong did or King Sejong did about inventing Korean Hangukmal and the writing. So you should know a few things about Western history too, okay? So that being said, just relax and let me get into the material. So let me go to sharing the screen here. So you see that week 5, right? Week 5. Okay. And again, this material will not be on the test. You can worry about learning it very thoroughly next week. Okay, the Reformation, 1455 through 1600. So that's like 145 years. Was anybody around in 1455? Anybody? Okay. I don't know. I'll have to check your IDs later. Okay, so let me start. To reform something is to fix something, right? You reform it. The Reformation is the name given to the era in which discontent, when you're discontented with something, you're very unhappy with it, right? You could be discontent with your job, you don't pay you enough and you work very hard. But here the discontent is with, as we shall see, with the practices and policies of the Catholic Church, which boiled over like a pot that's too hot. You cook too long, the problems were lasting too long, it boils over on the stove, causing widespread attempts at reform. So widespread means over a vast distance or area, hence the name Reformation. So basically what they're saying there is churchgoers were very upset with the practices and policies of the Catholic Church. And it just exploded or boiled over. And in many, many areas, people try to reform it. Okay? Every religion has different policies, and sometimes they enforce them too strongly, or they don't tell you about them until later, after you get baptized, and then maybe you might be upset about them. I won't name the name of the religion, but I had a friend that was in a religion, and he had me go to a lot of meetings, and I really liked it. And they actually studied the Bible, And I was very close to wanting to become a member of their church, even though they don't use the word church. And then I found out that you're going to have to sign a document that says you do not believe in blood transfusions. So basically, what that said is, for example, if my mother got into a bad car accident and the only way to save her life would be to give her a blood transfusion, because let's say she lost a lot of her blood on the freeway, I would not allow the doctors to do that, and then my mother would die. So I could not agree with that, because my feeling is uh, I want the doctors to do everything they can to save my mom's life. So again, we're going to learn about policies that they didn't like. So because the church resisted change, and most churches don't like to change, or people for that matter, thousands of Christians abandoned the Catholic Church and joined new Christian denominations. Okay? Denominations are other Christian churches that had a Catholic background, so Lutheranism, Protestantism, Mormonism. You know, some of you might belong Baptist. These new churches came to be known as Protestant denominations, so-called, again, look at the name Protestant, so-called because they were born in the protest against the original church. Little water there, thank you. Ooh, hopefully that wasn't soju. Okay. The word Catholic means universal. Wow, that sounds like maybe a good test question. Yeah. What does Catholic mean? And then I'll have a student say, oh, it means hot dog. That's not the answer. Before 1517, the Catholic Church was the universal Christian church in Western Europe. Universal, number one, and had controlled many aspects of people's lives for close to 1,000 years. Wow, it's a long time. That's older than me. In 1517, however, the birth of the, as I mentioned, one of the denominations earlier, Lutheran Church, put an end to the unquestioned spiritual authority of the Catholic Church. Again, people did not question it at the time. Whatever they said, they just said yes or nah. By 1600, thousands of Europeans were worshiping in Protestant churches, again, the denominations, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Anglican. Okay. In response, the Catholic Church made serious efforts to reform itself from within in what is generally called the Counter-Reformation. Okay. Positive efforts included founding seminaries all over Europe where young men could be educated. So these are like Catholic schools for priests. Young men could be educated and trained for the priesthood. Negative efforts included forcible attempts to stamp out Protestantism, so they didn't like it, they wanted to get rid of it, or heresy, as the church called it. So if you're Christians and church going, usually anything strong against the church, they call it heresy, and they feel it's against God. Through the Inquisition in Spain, which we read about prior, third week, in Spain in the 1500s, Portugal, and Italy, the church's reforms succeeded to a large extent. However, the Protestant churches continue to thrive, and thrive means to be successful. The era in. Okay, that brings me to the bottom of the first page. And you know it's going to be question time anytime I get to the bottom, right? So let me set this up. Okay. So for my very first question, again, these capitals don't want to come out correctly. Sorry about that. That's what happened to me in the other class. Okay, what was the Reformation? Okay. What was that? We talking about fixing cars? We talking about reforming prisoners in prison? No. Okay. 2. Okay. So as the people broke away from the Catholic Church, they formed new ones. So that brings us to question 2. What were the new churches called? They had a name. Okay. They had a name. So can you give me the name? Well, if you can, then we'll be in business. Okay. So don't say, oh, the new churches were called the Church of Love or the Church of Wine. No, it's not the case. Or the Church of Hamburgers. Okay. And this is a specific question. Oops, missed a letter there. Problem. Just go over it. Okay, so this one's specific. The second one, you know, there's a number of them. So again, I guess the more you put, the more points I can give you. 3, but which one specific new church put an end to the Catholic Church's domination? Okay, so before the Catholic Church was the only one. So this specific one initially put the end to their domination. Okay. And then this is my last question. Yes, I have 4 for the first page. Unbelievable. Okay. Okay. Plain and simple. What was the Counter-Revolution? Okay. What was that? So you had the Reformation, and now you had the Counter-Revolution. So just explain in a few words what that was. I'll give you a few minutes to answer those. Well, I mean, actually to write them down. You can answer them at your leisure, right? So there's 4, so it's going to take a minute to write those down. Right? But we're moving along at a good pace, which is very good. You guys are smart cookies. Okay. So I guess I'll pull out the eraser. All right, again, the first one. What was the Reformation? Was it a new musical band? 2, what were the new churches called? Please don't put church's fried chicken. 3, which new church put an end to the Catholic Church's domination? And 4, what was the Counter-Revolution? Okay. All right, so let me return back to the lecture. Okay, so we've finished with first page, which in the book would be 15. So, okay, you're going to see that you're going to love it. This is that happened prior. These are just a timeline, so I'll read them, but they're a timeline, and I don't bother you guys to know a lot of dates. So guess what? This page, no questions. So maybe that's why I asked 4 on the first one. So let me just read through this. Just let it go in one ear out the other. Think about it for a bit, but you don't have to remember these dates, okay? It's just in continuation of the lecture. So in which one Christian church ruled all of Western Europe had definitely come to an end. Ooh, sounds like an answer to number 4. Chapter 2 objectives. Define the term Reformation, one of my questions. So that comes straight from the book. And explain its importance in European history. Now, that would be an essay question, and I'm not giving you that. So you can easily just answer in a sentence or two what the Reformation was, but you do not have to write a few paragraphs and explain the importance in European history. Again, I'm being kind. Explain what caused the widespread protests against the Catholic Church, which we went over. Identify the major Protestant denominations and explain how and why each one came into being. So each one had a different reason, but we went over that too. Identify the major figures of the area. You don't have to know all the major figures. Describe the Catholic response to the revelation. That's an answer to one of my questions on that first page. Chapter 2 timeline, 1455. Johannes Gutenberg published the Vulgate Bible, the first book in Europe printed with movable type. This is important because before that time, majority of the population could not read, so they just listened to the priest read the Bible, had no idea to study it personally. But once you are able to print something, now people have a chance to try and read it for themselves. 1517, Luther publishes 95 theses. You don't have to know what that's about. 1521, diet of worms. That's not a popular diet at the time, but probably if you ate worms, you would lose a lot of weight. 1534, Act of Supremacy declares Henry VIII supreme head of the Church of England. We will go over a little bit of this. This is what's a little more important. 1540, Society of Jesuits is founded. Don't need to worry about that too much. A lot of American people now, the only thing they know about Jesuits priests is that they make brandy. So maybe in just our lecture, we'll learn a little bit more than the brandy part. 1541, Calvin establishes theocracy in Geneva. Again, not that important, or what he established, that he established theocracy. 1545 to 1563, Council of Trent, Catholic Reformation, and the Counter-Reformation. Again, we'll go a little more in depth over that. 1555, Peace of Augsburg, Augsburg being a city. 1598, Henry of Navarre becomes King of France. And then he issues the Edict of Nantes, which you don't need to know either. That's a little off on the side. Okay. The rise of Protestantism had multiple causes. Again, just don't give me one answer. The more the merrier. They included a growing realization that the church was not as powerful as it had claimed. A rise in secular, if you don't know secular, if you might hear someone have a conversation and the person says, well, I'm a secular person. What they're saying is they don't have a religion. They're secular. They don't believe in God. So they just, I don't have a religion, nor do I want one. So We finished that page and no questions. Yay. Temujin, start clapping and dancing. Okay. We're going to continue on the next page. And when we get done with this, we will have some questions. Okay. That's good. Okay. Political power. Again, talking about the church. And the perfection of the printing process, stimulating a rise in literacy. So again, it's what I mentioned on the timeline. Printing process and printing a mass load of books, it starts pushing people to get literate or be able to read. So remember, if you cannot read, then you are technically illiterate, right? The spark that finally pushed people into widespread open rebellion against the church, and that rebellion means when you fight back against the church here, could be the government, was the trade of indulgences for financial contributions to the church. Okay. I don't know if you've heard the word indulge. Okay. The modern way we use it is different than at this time. A lot of people will use this mostly for food, right? So someone goes on a diet, and then you ask them, what are you eating on the diet? What can't you eat? And they say, well, I cannot indulge in donuts. I cannot indulge in ice cream, for 30 days. And those are considered indulgences, kind of like things you should not eat, right? But you're going to see here used in a religious sense for your life. Okay, the Catholic Church functioned on a system of the forgiveness of sins. Does everybody know sin here? Anybody name any sins? Murder is a sin, right? Stealing is a sin. Actually, sloth is a sin. Gluttony is a sin. So all these things are sins. So they function on forgiving them. But you're going to see they got something in return for that. They just didn't say, okay, everything's okay, kenchana, right? They didn't do that. So you're going to learn here, a person sinned, repented, which means kind of asked for forgiveness and said, I will not ever do this again. Some people don't repent. They sin and they don't care. So a person sinned, repented, confessed to a priest, which is a big important step in the Catholic faith. You have to tell a priest your sins, even if they are minor, and received absolution in exchange for some form of penance. Again, big words here. Absolution is a word that means, it's tough. It's a tough one for me, but it means forgiveness, and you are now considered innocent to your crime that you committed or your sin. And how is that done? It says here, in exchange for some form of penance. And penance is like a duty. A lot of times it involves some kind of suffering. So this is the way you have to pay back for your sin and be absolved or receive absolution of your sin. So it's not free. The priest does not just say, okay, you're fine, right? So here we go. Here's some examples. This might involve repeating a certain number of prayers. So if any Catholics out there, you know the Ave Marias, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, things like that. Or doing good work in the community. So they would assign you to maybe do some hard, difficult work in the community to pay off your sin. A sinner who was granted an indulgence did not have to go through such a penance. An indulgence was an official promise that the church forgave earthly punishment for sins already committed. And here you're going to see how this started. It changed later, unfortunately, because at the time, certain people got very greedy. But here in the beginning, it's more innocent. So the first indulgences were granted to soldiers who had fought in the Crusades. That was a Christian war against the Muslims, as forgiveness for sins committed in the course of war. So these soldiers, let's say, even though they won, they felt guilty for maybe people that they had to kill. They just could not forget about it. So they go to the priest and ask for absolution and forgiveness. But a certain little point here, which is interesting for you to know, says, of course, God might still choose to punish sins after death. The church could only forgive earthly punishment. So what the church was trying to tell these soldiers was, well, we can absolve. Now we're using it as a verb, absolution is a noun. We can absolve your sins, but that only takes care of your existence here. When you die and meet God, if he chooses to punish you, aka send you to hell, we have no power over God's decision. So it's kind of warning them, like, okay, here we'll give you the absolution, but if you die, who knows, right? Continuing, the practice of granting indulgences quickly became corrupt. See, like I said, corruption. So both the church and its agents, most notably Johann Tetzel in Germany, grew or became, to a large extent, greedy for money and began offering indulgences in exchange for financial donations. So, brother, you feel guilty about a lot of things. I can offer you absolution. Just give me some money and we're set. I don't even know if that time, if they required the person to say 10 Hail Marys or anything, or work in the community. So like this person, most notably, started taking money from innocent people that felt very guilty about their sins. People were assured that if they donated money, their sins would be forgiven. See, I guess that's all it took for him, just take money. Not only on earth, but also after death. So he even changed, at least he did, his tune, as they say, and said, yeah, the more you give, I think God will forgive you in the afterlife. Not good. They were also told that they could purchase heavenly forgiveness for family members who were already dead. So if you don't understand that, let's say you have an auntie and uncle that died 10 years ago, but, maybe they weren't Catholic. You could buy forgiveness for them, right? Even though they were already dead. They did not have to be alive. But again, this is just coming from the corrupt priests, and not all of them were corrupt, right? The idea that one could buy forgiveness for sins with money, or that the church could preempt or stop God's power to forgive sin after death, deeply offended many devout Catholics. So you see, it wasn't all the Catholics. The most notable of these was Martin Luther. And then we're going to read a little patch about Martin Luther at the bottom. Okay. Martin Luther was born in 1483 in the German state of Saxony. He became a theological scholar and a professor of scripture, which is the written words of the Bible, at Wittenberg University. A devout Catholic. And again, a devout person. Let's say you and I are Catholics. And you ask me, do I go to church every week? And I tell you, I haven't gone to church in a year, but you go to church every week and do your Bible study, you're a devout Catholic. You study hard. I unfortunately do not. Luther was outraged by the notion that salvation could be bought and sold. His 95 theses, which appeared in 1517, were propositions for debate that questioned and criticized many aspects of the Catholic Church, including a prominent and harsh reference to the sale of indulgences. The 95 theses were printed and widely circulated, which means many people got a copy. And many people were convinced by Luther's arguments, so they believed in his arguments against the Catholic Church. The people ordered Luther to recant his criticisms of the church on pain of excommunication, and Luther refused. Okay, so when they ask you to recant something, it means whatever your statement was, you're supposed to say, okay, no, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean that. That's not my true feeling. So he refused. And then excommunication is a word in the Catholic Church. It doesn't mean I had communication with my ex-wife, right? Excommunication. It means, in regular people's terms, they kicked him out of the church. That's why people say, hey, you're a Catholic, right? And you haven't seen the person for 10 years, and they say, no, I got excommunicated, right? They kicked me out of the church. And just to let you know, different Christian sects or faiths, they can use different words. I know people in the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't use excommunication. They use a term called disfellowshipped, which kind of means like you do not belong with your friends anymore or the group. So just to let you know that. At this time in history, the German city-states of North Central Europe were bound in a loose alliance known as the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? Each state has its, and that brings us to the bottom of what would be page 17. Okay, and I have a couple of questions there for you. So I'm going to have to go to the whiteboard. And again, we're moving along very well. So this is my 16 was no question, so 17. So this will be question 5, because we had 4 on the first one. Just keeping you abreast. Okay, 5. How did the Catholic Church function? How did it go about doing its day-to-day business? That's what I need to know there, okay? Which we talked about in depth, so I can't give you any hints there, okay? Okay, next one. Okay, question 6. Why did granting indulgences become corrupt? So we talked in depthly, or I explained about the granting of indulgences. So you just need to say, why did they become corrupt? You know, why did they become mafia style, right? What was the reason? And remember, not everybody did this, right? And they specifically spoke about one person, if that gives you a hint. Okay. Okay, the next one. And I think this is the last one for this page. I only have 3 here. This will be a little simpler. Okay. Oh, I got a question mark there. All right. What outraged Martin Luther? I'll probably get a student and say, you know, teacher, you didn't explain outrage. I don't know what that means. I want a free ice cream. Okay. So, outrage, you can be angry, but when it's something you really, really cannot accept, then you're going to have to protest, then that is what outrage is. So, I don't know if you young folks were aware, early last year, suddenly the political people in K-Town decided, without asking the K-Town citizens or their city community people, hey, we just want to make a big homeless shelter here right in the middle of K-Town. Thank you. And when the local Korean people and business owners heard about this, they were outraged because they were not asked. And suddenly there was going to be this shelter there that would damage everybody's business, maybe cause the situation to be unsafe. So they protested because they were outraged. Okay, and good thing that they did. I support them. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to answer 5, 6, and 7. Again, the first page was 4. Second page, no questions. And this page, 3. Okay, you're wrapping that up? Good. All right, so write these down and then, you know, take them on your leisure next to answer them. Right? Okay, I'm going to have to go for the eraser in a second. Okay. Here we go. Oops, went to the text, sorry. Eraser, here we go. 5, bye-bye. 6, bye-bye. And 7, bye-bye. Okay. Now let me head back to the lecture. Okay, so we finished with the top of Martin Luther, where it said each state had its. So in the book, I would be on page 18. So each had its own prince with one emperor ruling over all. The rulers of the provinces were called electors because the emperor was chosen by election, believe it or not. Over time, the election had become purely ceremonial. So I guess it was not a real election where people actually voted. They just did a ceremony. So that doesn't sound too good either. Since 1440, the title had been passed down in the ruling Habsburg, spelled Habsburg in some sources. So again, this goes back to, you know, don't be shocked by this. Same thing that I noticed in Korea. Some people call Busan with a B, and some people write it with a P. So I'm not quite, I haven't been told specifically why that is. So this happens here in other countries too. Family, the Habsburg family, in the same manner as any hereditary monarch in Europe. So again, things were passed down by the family. That's how things were done. And again, they were also done that way in Asia. And as we look at today, we had the scare, 2 weeks ago with Kim Jong-un that he might have been dead. And they were trying to find who was next. And, there was rumors of the sister, and then I don't know if it's a younger brother or something, but he's too young, so maybe the uncle. So all these things have to stay within the family, right? It can't just be some outside guy like, hey, I'm Johnny Yoon. I want to be the emperor of North Korea. It's not going to happen. Okay. So in 1519, Charles I of Spain was crowned Holy Roman Emperor, succeeding his grandfather, in the family, Maximilian I. He would rule as Emperor Charles V, Carlos Quito. In 1521, Charles called all his princesses together. So male princes, not princesses, that's female, together for a diet. And again, it's not to stop eating. As you can see, a diet is called an official assembly of these powerful people at the town of Worms. So that's why we saw it earlier. The diet of Worms has nothing to do with losing weight. There's just an actual town called Worms, right? Summoned to appear before the diet, Luther refused to recant his statement. So there's recant again. He refused to say his statements were false. Ordered to leave the empire, he instead accepted an offer of protection from the Elector of Saxony. Luther continued to write and publish, and in his own astonishment, soon realized that instead of bringing about reform in the Catholic Church, he had founded a new denomination. So that's a common situation that happens again all over the world. You're probably too young to remember Idi Amin, but he was the dictator of a country called Uganda and killed many, oh gosh, I don't know, they said millions of his own people. And he escaped being killed, and he was given protection. No one knew for a long time, but he was given protection in Saudi Arabia, right? And other people, when they deposed the longtime President Marcos of the Philippines, he was given protection in Hawaii, right, in the United States. So this happens over and over of the world, okay? So next, the most important idea behind Lutheranism is the notion that salvation depends on faith. Each believer must read, study, and understand Scripture, again, the written word of the Bible, for himself or herself. In effect, each soul would serve as his or her own priest. Instead of relying exclusively on an ordained priest to interpret the word of God. So in other words, you in the Lutheranistic faith, you are in charge of your future, whether heaven and hell. It was not the choice of your priest to tell you if you were going to go to hell or not, right? Or maybe go to heaven. You had to sacrifice, and the choice would be based upon your efforts. Part of what made this possible was, of course, the technology of printing, which before long brought a Bible into every household. So again, I told you before this printing process, most of the people were illiterate. When you went to the Catholic Church, only the priests could read it, and you just had to take for granted what they said. You had no way of studying it because you could not read. Luther's German translation of the Bible appeared in 1534. For the first time, Germans could read the Bible in their own language rather than having to learn Hebrew, which is the language of the Jewish folks, Latin, which was the language of the Holy Roman Empire for hundreds of years, or Greek. Greek was the first translation from the Jewish. Okay. Luther advocated or stood for or promoted a simple worship service, arguing that the communion or connection between the individual, you or me, and God took place in the individual's heart and mind. So again, making it very personalized. The elaborate ceremony, so anything elaborate is very complicated and kind of flashy. The elaborate ceremony of the Catholic Mass to Luther was merely an outward show that had no spiritual significance. Luther also argued that worship services should be conducted in the language of the people so that they could understand exactly what was being said and think about it for themselves. These ideas and reforms appealed to thousands of Germans. Okay? So basically what they're saying here, I can put that in a modern situation for you. I have a lot of Koreans, it seems, in this class. So I can guess there's a certain percentage that may be Christian. Korea is the country with the largest population in Asia of growing Catholics, so I might have a few Catholics also. So I'm sure with your families, you go to Korean language services. Now imagine if that was not possible. So we don't care if your uncle or auntie just came from Korea and they don't speak English. The church wants it in English only, right? So at this time, they did it in Latin, they did it in Greek. If you lived in Germany or other countries, you didn't know what they were talking about. So this put forward the idea, hey, you're going to conduct the church services in Germany. Why don't you let them have a Bible so they can read and understand in German, right? So several of the German princes became enthusiastic or very excited. Lutherans as well. When Lutheranism became the state religion, the church's vast wealth, again, we've gone over vast, we use it in the term of land, like a vast country is Russia or China. Russia is actually larger than China, if you can believe it. The United States is also considered a vast country. It's so large. But here we're talking about vast wealth, probably rich beyond your dreams, and property passed from the Pope's control into the hands of the prince. This was a powerful practical reason for adopting Lutheranism, above and beyond questions of spirituality. However, many princes remained devoutly Catholic. I've gone over devout prior. It didn't matter. They still wanted to be devoutly Catholic, even with new information. At first, Charles V tolerated or put up with Lutheranism, but as it spread, various groups began using it as a basis for social and political revolt. So reading the very last part of the bottom, in 1529, the emperor, and at that point I would stop. because that would be the bottom of 19. So let me go to the questions on 19. Okay. Taking a little water there, a lot of talking. Okay, so I'm on 19. So 7 questions, or let's see, actually 10. So, well, I guess it doesn't matter with the number, as long as you just have them. So this should be 11, I think. So very straightforward on this question. Calvinism still exists, so. Okay. What is the central idea of Calvinism? What is it? What's the main focal point of the religion? Okay. Their belief. Okay. Now, these are going to be connected. I haven't done one of these in a while. So once you get the answer for 11, then you should be able to answer 12. Okay. These ran together, excuse me. Okay. So 12 is, what does that mean? So whenever you find the answer for 11, like let's say it was, what's, mola mola, and then the answer is love, right? You're gonna have to say, well, what is that, or what does love mean? So see, that would be too hard to answer, but here this will be easy because you will find it on the page. Okay. So this should be easier than that. Again, like when someone told me years ago, all Korean women have Han, and my question was, what does Han mean? And answers were difficult to come by. Okay. And this is the last one for this page. We have 3 here. Okay. How was Calvinism strict? Okay. How was it considered strict? There's a few reasons there, not just one. Okay. But just don't put one. So I'll give you a few minutes to answer these 3. We're kind of wrapping it up soon. We're going to do it a little early because besides these questions to answer, you will have a midterm. So I'm going to cut it a little early today, okay? Is that a good idea, or would you like me to add 20 more questions? Does that sound better? Yeah, I hear Temujin saying, yeah, I want the 20, or Alex, or maybe Inky. Inky maybe wants 30, or Olor Ma, she's such a great student. Okay. All right, so I think I've given you enough time on answering these. So let me go to the eraser. Well, bye-bye. Okay, so back to this exciting lecture. Okay, so okay, make sure we don't lose a point here. All right, so I guess we have to finish up here. So Luther advocated a simple worship service. Okay, simple worship service, and arguing that the communion between the individual and God took place. Okay, I've already done that, right? Yeah, right. Okay, so we're down on the bottom here, where he decreed a ban on Lutheranism. Yeah, so he decreed a ban on Lutheranism. It was during this period that the term Protestant first came into use, describing the Lutheran princes and people who protested against the emperor's decree. War eventually broke out between the German states over this issue. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg settled the matter by declaring that each German prince could determine the religion of his own state. Wow, interesting. They had some toleration there. Lutheranism took firm hold in Germany and also spread north to the Scandinavian countries. Meanwhile, a rather different form of Protestant Christianity developed in Switzerland. So let's get into that. And more of a deeper Calvinism here. Okay. John Calvin was born in France in 1509. He studied philosophy, law, and humanism. And learned both Latin and Greek. Because again, that's what mainly the Bible was studied in at that time. Like Luther, Calvin came to believe that the Catholic Church needed reform. When he spoke out on this issue, he found himself so unpopular in France that he fled or escaped to Switzerland. Here he eventually acquired so much power and influence that many historians describe the city of Geneva as theocracy, a state ruled by religious laws. The central idea of Calvinism is predestination, the belief that God predetermines everything that will happen on earth. So a lot of my Asian students talk about a destiny, that that's your future and you cannot change it. So this is the same thing, except Calvinism believes your destiny is made by God. So do what you want to try to change it, but it's not going to happen. God has chosen for you, it's what will happen. According to this belief, human beings are already marked for salvation or damnation at birth. So what that means, when you're born, they believe God has already decided this person will go to heaven and this person will go to hell. That's their belief. And no amount of faith or good deeds can earn salvation. So no matter how many good things you do, if you're predestined by God to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. Calvin argued that those who were saved would naturally perform good works and lead exemplary lives. So that's meaning have a very a life that is a high example. So he's trying to say that you don't know it, but if God had chosen you to go to heaven, then you would probably naturally be doing things that were good And I guess people that were chosen for hell as a baby would become criminals and just do bad things, because that was their predestination. Therefore, all believers must live this way, because it was one sure sign that they were among the saved. Calvinism strictly regulated every aspect of a person's life. It made church attendance mandatory. Gotta go. No, well, I'll go next week, or I'll go next month, or I'll go in the summer. It was mandatory or forced. Encouraged simplicity in dress, so no wild, sexy clothes going to church, and forbade many forms of enjoyment, such as dancing, singing, and playing cards. So that's your strict area right there. Right? When I was a kid, I knew some Jehovah. I think they changed it, but they were very strict when I was a kid. And if we had a little dance or singing at the school, the elementary school, the student could not do that because the faith said those were not good things to do. So they would sit out. And of course, playing cards even without money, I guess they thought is gambling. Despite its harsh rules and its intolerance of other forms of worship, Calvinism gained many converts. So even though it was tough and strict, many people were attracted to it. Maybe certain people say, hey, I need tough rules because I'm a wild guy. You know? Calvin's followers spread his ideas and practices throughout Switzerland, the Netherlands, and France. John Knox transported many of the Calvin's ideas home to Scotland, where the religion was called Presbyterianism, after the presbyters or elders who ruled the church. In 1560 and 1561, Parliament made Presbyterianism the state religion of Scotland. Wow. Went over the channel there. In France, Calvin's followers were called French Protestants or Huguenots. Despite tens of thousands of individual converts to Protestantism, France as a whole was not sympathetic to the Reformation. The French monarchs sided with the Catholics throughout a series of civil wars fought from 1562 to 1598. Okay, that brings us to the end of 19, but it looks like I have somehow given you the questions already. Okay. So again, you have them, so I'll just say them again. We're gonna have to write new ones here, so I guess we'll end shorter. What is the central idea of Calvinism? So this whole page has more in-depth info on Calvinism. And then what does that mean? So you'll have the in-depth information. And then 10, how was Calvinism strict? So I went over that. They listed, I think, maybe 3 things. So easy peasy. So let me look and see what the next page looks like. Okay. All right. So I would be on 20 in the book. So helping to ensure that Protestantism could not establish itself securely, thousands of Huguenots were massacred, or means killed, and many more fled France to settle in Holland, Belgium, and England. The 1580s saw a struggle for the French throne known as the War of the Three Henrys. These were King Henry III and 2 of his kinsmen, Henry of the Guise and Henry of Navarre. With the support of Philip II of Spain, Henry of the Guise made a bold move to take the throne, but he was taken by surprise by supporters of Henry III and assassinated. When a fantastic assassinated a fanatic, which means a crazy person, a religious crazy person, assassinated the king the following year, Henry of Navarre inherited the throne. He would rule as King Henry IV of France. So a lot of Henrys in there. Henry IV was a Calvinist, but his religious convictions were not nearly as strong as his political ambition. His main goal was to strengthen the monarchy, and he believed that siding with the religious majority was a crucial step to achieving security on his throne. Therefore, Henry converted to Catholicism. In 1598, he issued the Edict of Nantes, which established Catholicism as the state religion of France and its territories, but allowed Protestants to worship as they saw fit without molestation, meaning bothered. This ended the French civil wars of religion, and Henry was enlightened enough to understand that tolerance in the matter of private worship would lead to a domestic accord or relaxed agreement in the population and would therefore benefit the kingdom. So there's no really new words there, so I don't have to go through any. So going to the bottom part, Henry VIII and the Church of England. The Anglican Church, also called the Church of England, is unique in history for two reasons. First, it was created solely for political reasons, not religious ones. Very important for you to know that. Second, it was the most sweeping assertion of secular authority in the history of Europe. By the 1520s, King Henry VIII of England and the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon had been married for several years. Although Catherine had given birth to several children, only one, a daughter, had survived past infancy. Lacking a male heir, Henry dreaded or worried severely about possible rival claims to the throne and a return to the civil wars that had battered England throughout the 1400s. He was also personally tired of Catherine. Therefore, Henry petitioned Pope Clement VII for an annulment of his marriage. The king had fallen in love with a lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn, who was several years younger than Catherine, and seemed likely to provide him with healthy children. Ironically, only one. Okay. So that brings us to the bottom of 20. So I have a couple of questions on 20. I think only two. So let me go to the whiteboard. Yeah, only two. Yay, because we're wrapping it up. We have one more page and we're done for today. Easy, straightforward stuff. So I think this is 14. I'm not sure. Easy and straightforward. What was Henry IV's main goal? Okay. What was his main goal? Okay, the last one, only two on this page. And then we'll proceed to the actual last page. Okay. Easy peasy. If you know one, you should know the other. Okay. The Anglican Church of England is also known as what? Right? So they call it the Anglican Church, and it has another name too. And that's it for those two on that page. So I'll give you a minute or two to do those. And then we'll proceed to the very last page for today. Okay? So take your time on these two questions. Okay, I guess I'll pull out the eraser. 14, we have to say goodbye to. 15, say goodbye to. All right, return to the lecture and our last page for today. So we finished the bottom, so. Okay, this is our last reading right here. Start jumping, Paul. Okay. It said the only daughter of their marriage would survive. Henry would have to marry yet again in order to produce a son. So a lot of marriages for that man. Henry VIII never tolerated opposition at any time in his life. When the Pope refused to grant him his annulment, which means to cancel his marriage, the king determined to find another way to get what he wanted. In 1533, he named Thomas Cranmer, a loyal official of the court, the new Archbishop of Canterbury. Archbishop Cranmer granted Henry his annulment, which means gave it to him, and then married him to Anne Boleyn. The new Pope, Paul III, excommunicated, again, I went over that, kicked out both the king and the archbishop for violating the sacrament of marriage, which they felt marriage was holy. In 1534, the British Parliament retaliated against the Pope by passing the Act of Supremacy. This act acknowledged the king as the supreme head of the church in England, thus creating a new Christian denomination, yet another one, and eliminated any papal involvement in British affairs, which means no more involvement of the Pope. Pope has a lot to say in other countries like Italy and France. The Pope says no, and people agree. Here it said, bye-bye, Pope. We're just going to deal with the king here. In effect, the British monarch now had the same authority over England that the Pope had over the rest of Europe, as you can see. No secular government had ever asserted such power against secular nor religion in 1,000 years of church authority. It is important to note the role of Parliament in the creation of the Church of England. The king did not create the Anglican Church with a wave of a royal scepter, which is the wand that they pull around. Instead, the duly elected representative government passed the Act of Supremacy according to the laws of the land. Thus, Henry VIII could claim with some reason that the English people and the government fully supported his desire to break away from the Catholic Church. And a very last part here, in a clear sign that Henry's actions had been politically and not spiritually motivated, the Anglican Church continued to hear confessions and celebrate Mass in just the same manner as the Catholic Church. Under Henry's son and successor, Edward VI, the clergy introduced various reforms, such as permission for priests to marry. Wow. In 1549, Archbishop Cranmer published the Book of the Common Prayer, which contained the prayers and the proper forms of all Anglican services in English, not Latin. During the next century, the status of the Church of English fluctuated, which means goes up and down, according to the personal faith of the monarch. Okay, so we've done with the reading. I've got 2 questions here, and we're done. So let me go to the whiteboard. Text. Okay, so I'm going to write a long question, and you're going to get a short answer. And I'm supplying the date so you can find it. Okay. In 1534, how did the British Parliament, again, their governmental system, retaliate against the Pope? What did they do to get their revenge against the Pope? Okay. You ready for the last question? Or should I make up 20 more? Let me know now. I'm ready to do it. You want to do another 2 hours on the lecture? I don't think so. But I can do it. Okay, last question for today. Easy one or hard one? Oh, hard. Okay, I have to give you a hard one. Okay, last question for this week. Week 5, Western civilization. What did the Book of Common Prayer contain? Which means, what was it about? What was inside? What did it talk about in the book? Did it talk about the Lakers? Did it talk about some grandmother's old recipes for making a good stew? What was discussed in the Book of Common Prayer? Okay. All right, so that's it for the day. Write these last 2 down and then realize that I will send the test to the office, and then the office should shortly send you the midterm. It's like, teacher said final. You know, the quarter's not over yet. Okay, that hasn't happened. So it will be the midterm. And today's material will not be on the test. Okay, this material will be for the final. It'll be the first 4 weeks though. Okay, which if you remember were what? Ivan, Russian history, Spain in the 1500s, and then last week was the 1-year war, or maybe the 30 years war. So that's what will be on it. Today's stuff later. Okay. So let me erase these, and we are done for the day. So everybody take care, and I shall see you next week. Okay. Bye-bye.